Hey y'all, and welcome to Peyton's Place. Here on Peyton's Place, I'm going to tell you about all things college. I'm going to tell you about how to be a successful student activist. We'll talk about different things that you can do as a young adult to have fun. I'll talk about different things I do in my new city, and I'll also talk about different hot topics or current social movements. Before we get started, I just want to ask everyone to make sure they like, comment, subscribe, hit that little bell, turn on your post notifications as well so you never miss an episode. But you know where to find me here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. And on this episode, I'm going to be talking to one of my best friends. She is a graduate of USC, University of Southern California. Her name is May, and we're going to tell you how you can pay for college. Hey everyone, I am here with one of my best friends, May. May and I went to high school together and we've just been friends ever since, and she's doing some amazing big things. So I'm going to let her go ahead and tell y'all about herself.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, Peyton. Thank y'all for tuning in today. My name is May. I use she, her pronouns. I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Peyton and I, again, went to high school together, and I moved out to Los Angeles a few years ago to attend the University of Southern California. I got my bachelor's in public policy, and I'm now working on my master's in public administration, both at the Seoul Price School of Public Policy. And really, when I entered into school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I actually used to be pre-med, and I was really convinced that I was either going to be a cardiologist or go into OB-GYN and or do health policy. And so when I came into my undergrad, I was pre-med and I only had a minor. I had a minor in health policy. And so I took that course for my minor my freshman year, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And after I realized I no longer wanted to go to medical school because I was really more invested in the health policy side of medicine, I switched my major to public policy. And I got a bachelor's of science in public policy with an emphasis on health management and health policy. And so, yeah, now though, I'm not even necessarily in the health policy field directly. I am a government relations manager at a nonprofit. And so for the past 2 or 3 years, I've been in government. I started working out with a state assembly member here in California. And then from there, I started working on political campaigns for folks running for elected office here in Los Angeles. And then now that translated to me working at this nonprofit doing government relations after I've gotten a few years under my belt. And so, yeah, I'm a government relations manager, and I also have a small business on the side. I do political consulting for campaigns, both for the elected officials and ballot measures. And so my industry is policy and politics and government. And I'm going to continue to do that by getting my master's in public admin.
Hey, masters, here for it. I feel so like knowing May back in high school, I never would have thought that she'd be like in politics. Like, she's very like, don't get it twisted. She's very outspoken, very like, she's gonna get it done. Like, perfect, politician. But I just never thought that like you'd be in politics. So it's just
either.
Yeah, it's great to see you flourishing and seeing you, figure out what it is that you're passionate about. And just like, enjoy doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And I mean, like, I feel like a lot of people say that you end up doing things you never thought you do. Like, I never ever planned to be in politics nor government.
Yeah.
At any point. And it kind of just happened, right? And so, yeah, definitely keep an open mind about where you'll land.
Yes. Okay, so to get into the questions, basically what I want to talk about today is about how to fund college, like not just solely tuition, because like we all know it's like books, being on campus, paying for housing, segregated funds, like all this other stuff that goes into being a college student, and especially like being in Cali, going to USC. I know it's like very expensive. And I remember when you were like applying and figuring out like financial aid, scholarships, grants, all of that. So I want to tap into your expertise. So the first thing I want to ask is, well, you already said like, what college you graduated from, but how much is it to attend USC?
Very expensive. USC is not cheap. Tuition alone at USC is a little over 60,000 a year, so 30,000 per semester.
A large. You got money. He got money. Get it all for him.
In the event you are not full time and you are going part time, you get charged on a per unit rate. And right now, every unit at USC is about $2,000. So let's say I took 8 units, which is typically just 2 courses. That would run me anywhere between 10 and 16,000.
That's great.
Or like the 16,000 side. So yeah, it is not cheap. Mm-hmm. It is not cheap. And so kind of I didn't think I was going to get into USC. By the time I was applying, USC was extremely, extremely, extremely competitive. I want to say my class was like a 9 or 10% acceptance rate. But once I got in, that's when I really started figuring out how I was going to pay for everything and how I was going to finance it. And what I will say about paying for college, and I think it's really important that all incoming college students understand this, is like financial aid is a case by case by case basis. And it really just depends on the resources that you have and whether or not your parents have any money saved up for you at all to go to college. And so that will dictate how you fund it. And then it will also dictate how you fund it is your parents' financial state. So that's why I think a lot of folks that mentor students going through the college application process will always tell you it's super important that you sit down with your parents and you have an honest and transparent conversation about how much money per year they make, about any investments that they have, any businesses that they own, any dividends that they have, any debt that they have, because all of those things will impact your financial aid package.
So you talked a little bit about like once you got there is kind of really when you figured out different ways to help support yourself. What were some of those different things? Like, did you find scholarships through your school or through like local, like different places locally? How did you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, so the major way that I paid for USC was USC grant money. USC is a very expensive school, but USC is a very wealthy school and it has a huge endowment. Our school has over a $7 billion endowment. So what that means is that is money that the school has, like actual cash and like liquid assets that the school has to both one, fund students to go to that school, and two, to just like protect the fiscal viability of the school. And so because we have such a large endowment, that means USC has a phenomenal financial aid program. So the way it worked out for me was, and this is the process that you go through at every single school in the US, regardless of how you pay for it, is the first thing you have to do is figure out how much will you actually be charged to go to school, right? Mm-hmm. There's a difference between the estimated cost of attendance and the actual cost that you are getting charged. And so when I went through the financial aid application process at USC, I was considered a high needs student. And the reason why I was considered a high needs student is because, one, my parents don't have thousands of dollars sitting around in investments, nor did they have an actual account set up for me saving money for school. So because of that, USC gave me about $20,000 per semester, or maybe even more than 20,000. I want to say it was anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per semester in grant aid. And so that was grants coming from USC literally giving me money to go to school there. And like I said before, it was $60,000 in tuition. So the way it worked out for me was the vast majority of my tuition was actually paid for by grant money. And all the other expenses that I had, and so that's housing, dining, and transportation are like the main other expenses you'll have. Those expenses I cover through my federal loans. And so depending what year you are in college, like for example, as a freshman, I want to say you get a max of like $5,500 a year that you can borrow in federal loans. And so what I did every year as an undergrad is I borrowed the max amount of money in federal loans that I could. And so my tuition was paid for by the grant money, and all of my other expenses like housing and transportation were paid for by my loans.
Okay.
And so there was never, except we had a hiccup for sophomore year, my parents' tax status changed significantly sophomore year. And this is why I say you have to have an honest conversation with your parents, because I remember my sophomore year of college, they were looking at 2016 taxes to determine financial aid eligibility. And my dad's 2016 taxes had an inheritance because his father died. So he inherited property and liquid cash, right? And that comes up on your taxes. And so because my father inherited those things, now my expected family contribution to my education changed, right? So actually what happened was there was a gap my sophomore year between the amount of money USC was giving me to go to school and the amount of money that I owed, because I got less grant money because of this inheritance, right? And so that year I had to take out a private loan, right? Because like I said before, I had no money. I did not have any thousands of dollars to pay USC, but that money is still owed and you still have to pay all of that in order for you to enroll in your classes. And so that's what happens with a lot of students. Whatever your grant aid, whether that is loans or grants, doesn't cover it, if you still have expenses outstanding that, you have to take out private loans and or Parent Plus loans. And so, yeah, that's the short of it. I know I just said a lot, but that's the short of it. I paid for college through grants from my institution and through federal loans. It was very few years and semesters that I actually paid cash out of pocket to go.
Okay. Yeah, I know about federal loans for sure. That's how I paid for my college.
Yep.
And like Parent Plus loans, because it is like a cap on exactly how much money you can get federally. As far as
max of like $7,500, and you have to work your way up to that. You don't get $7,500 until your senior year.
Right. Yeah. So you start real low, and then because college is expensive. Like it's a scam, but you gotta get your degree.
Very expensive.
So what you kind of talked about the different things you did. So what if you would go back, senior year, May at DSHA, in our uniforms, what would you have done differently to kind of prepare yourself financially for college?
Oh yeah. Okay. So many things. One, I think what a lot of incoming students need to understand is outside of the money that you actually owe your institution, you need so much money for college. So save, right? I don't remember exactly how much I came to USC my first semester with, but I can tell you right now, it was less than, I feel like I came to school with less than $3,000. And the reason I'm laughing is because if you are a college student, you know that is pennies, right? I had less than
3,000. Yeah, that's the way it do back home. So
yeah, I had less than $3,000. So literally, I moved to California in the LA with less than $3,000 to live off of. And so that's why I'm dying laughing. I don't know how I did it, but I got through the semester on $3,000. And so that's why I say, I would tell my senior year self to save a lot of money, because you will need money for food. You'll want to go out with friends. You'll need books. There may be emergencies come up. If you have to go to the doctor, you could get billed. If your computer breaks, you need to replace it. If your phone breaks, you need to replace it. Laundry, transportation, Ubers, Lyfts, your car, if you have a car with gas and insurance and your car note. there are so many bills that you will have to pay while you're in college that are not necessarily being paid to your institution. It's just to live, right? So that's one thing I would say is save up your money, save as much as you can. The second thing I would say is budget. You need a budget and you need to stick to it. Like, you need to calculate how much money per week am I going to spend and on what, like on food, on leisure, on transportation. Budget your money out, because like a semester is actually a long time. And so I think what a lot of college students do is like, you come into the beginning of semester like, oh, I got 5 bands, 6 bands, I'm chilling. You are kicking it, you are eating, you are taking weekend vacations, and then midterms hit in October and you are broke.com. You have $400.
Because it's midterms, like, and you stress because you ain't got no money. Like,
Exactly. So budget and stick to your budget. It is always better to have more money at the end of the semester than not, because that just makes everything so much more stressful. And then also, and I know we'll probably get into this right afterwards, but when you're a senior in high school determining where you're going to go to college, you need to think about, how am I going to pay for this for 4 years? Not how am I going to pay for it for 1 year? And that's particularly important if you are a student that maybe got an outside scholarship. And let's say, for example, you got an outside scholarship and it was really significant. They gave you $20,000, right? $20,000, $30,000. That's great. But if that's only for 1 year, you got to figure out, okay, in year 2, 3, and 4, I'm not going to have this $20,000 scholarship. So what am I going to do to make up the gap? And so that's something else that I would really encourage high school students to think about, is have a financial plan for all 4 years, not just the first year.
yeah. And you kind of mentioned, so like, I think a lot of times when people are like looking at applying to colleges where they want to go, like they look at certain different things, but I don't think looking at how I'm going to pay to go to this institution for 4 years is one thing. And you kind of mentioned how the estimated cost is different than like, you know, the total price that you're going to be paying. So what's like a tip that you would give to like students who are like looking at making that college decision or looking at applying to colleges? Because I mean, as school starts, people are going to start taking those like tests and trying to figure out where they want to go. But I think it's also very important to look at how much does it really cost to go to this place or this school that I want to go to. So like, where's some places or things that you think people can get a realistic idea of how much it really costs to attend a school?
Totally. So what I strongly encourage all students to do is to determine what is a cost that you are going to be billed for. So when you go to your like dream institution's website, they're going to have on there on the financial aid page estimated cost of attendance. And that estimated cost of attendance is going to include things like tuition, segregated fees, transportation, personal expenses, housing, and maybe a few other miscellaneous costs. But the reality is you are not going to actually get billed for all those things. The university is going to bill you for your tuition. And if you live in on-campus housing, they're going to bill you for the housing. They're also going to bill you for the mandatory and segregated fees. So those are the 3 things that you know for sure every single semester you will get a direct bill from the university from. But they're still going to include things like transportation, like meals, because those are true costs that you'll have, but those are not things that the university is necessarily billing you for. Like, for example, they'll probably budget $1,200 a semester for transportation. But like that means like your Uber and your Lyft and like maybe your car note and your gas, right? But they're not actually going to bill you that cost, right? So you can kind of take that off as you're trying to determine how much it'll cost. Same with meals. So if you're a student, and this totally depends on students, but what your student situation is, but if you are living in off-campus housing and you don't buy a dining plan, you're not going to get charged for meals on your bill. You only get charged for dining and for meals if you live in on-campus housing and you bought a dining plan. So that too is something else that you maybe won't get billed for. And so that's why I say really determine what exactly are you going to get charged for and what are you not going to get charged for. And then you take what you're actually going to get charged for. So your tuition and your housing. If you're a freshman, you're more than likely going to live in on-campus housing. And you add those two things up. And that's your grand total, right? That you're going to get billed for. And then what you do is you deduct all the grants you got and all the loans you got. So you take that grand total and you subtract your grant money, you subtract your loan money, right? And then whatever you have left is the gap, right? And so let's just say, for example, my bill at USC per semester was like $40,000, right? And so let's just say, for example, I got $30,000 in grant aid. So I'm going to do 40 minus 30, that's 10,000. And then from there, I got $7,000 in loan. So I'm going to do 10 minus 7, and that's 3,000. And that $3,000 is how much actual cash I need to pay to the university. Or I could get an outside scholarship to cover that $3,000, and that's how I pay for it. And so I kind of suggest that's a great process for prospective students to walk themselves through to figure out like how much cash you and your family will have to pay a university, or if you could potentially go without paying out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess just something else that I want to point out is like, so I went to an in-state school. So like I was paying like in-state tuition. And May went to school out of state, so she's paying like out of state tuition. So I think also like paying attention to things like that, like how much each school is within your state. Some states who border, where you're at, you can get in-state tuition from some of those.
Mm-hmm.
And also just everyone's situation is different. So like the first 1 or 2 years, you're really taking all the same classes. So you might not be able to go to like that dream college or that school you want to go to because you can't afford it like every 4 years. But like also transferring is always an option as well if you need to go to a different school for your first 2 years. But I would say the main thing is to like look at all this and look at what you're able to do, what your parents are doing, and figure out what's best for you, because everyone's route is gonna look different. So yeah. I have like friends who have like full scholarships all 4 years, some of them did 5th years and have like their tuition paid for, but that's not always the case. So that's where a lot of these tips that May said are going to be very beneficial.
Yeah.
If there's anything else you want to add, if you want to plug your business one more time, I'm gonna put everything in the description box as well to make sure people tune in. But
yeah, let's see. I would just say my number one piece of advice is for anyone that's looking to go to college to get a bachelor's degree is, in my opinion, and a lot of people will debate me on this, but in my opinion, it is never, ever, ever worth it to take out more than $30,000 to $35,000 in student loans for an undergraduate degree. And that's kind of high. A part of me wants to say, don't ever take out more than 20 grand. But, when you're making your college decisions, the reality is in our generations and generations coming after us, a bachelor's degree is becoming an equivalent to a high school degree or a GED. Like it's very much so the bare minimum. Like you going to college today in 2021 or 2022 is different than going to college in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And so I say that to say, I do not think it is always in people's best interest to leave an undergraduate degree with 6 figures in debt. I say that one, because you will very likely get a master's or a PhD that will cost you more money. And two, if you really just look at, and there's plenty of articles on this, but if you look at the return on investment in a bachelor's degree, it is actually not that high. The amount of money that you can make to get a bachelor's degree versus what you're going to get back from taking out those loans, you do get your money back, right? And it really does protect your earning potential throughout your career. But it is not crazy high. So therefore, it may not be worth it to take out 6 figures in debt to go get a 4-year degree. And then I think something else that I would add is really understand the difference between private and public institutions. And Peyton touched on that. With private institutions, it doesn't matter where you live. If you live 5 minutes away or 5 states away, everyone is paying the same rate of tuition. Right. With public institutions, if you live in that state, you're typically paying less than 50% less than folks coming from out of state. And so that too is something else to weigh. I will say though, a lot of private institutions typically have better financial aid because they have endowments, right? Like it costs more to go there, but they have like plenty of people giving millions of dollars. So they have a lot of different ways to really help you finance your education and give you grant money. Public institutions, of course, people give to public institutions, but they serve a different purpose. Their purpose isn't necessarily to build huge endowments to help students go there. And so I would definitely nail those two differences down. And then the last thing I would say is, again, have those honest conversations with your parents about their financial state. It is super stupid, but just the way that our financial aid system is set up, they determine how much your family needs to contribute based off of your parents' combined income. Not just your dad, not just your mom, combined. Like, for example, my parents are divorced. And I really only lived with one of my parents for the vast majority of my childhood, but they still consider both parents' combined income to determine how much I owe. So you need to ask your parents, do we have thousands of dollars in investment somewhere? How many properties do you actually own? How many businesses do you own? And are there any equity in any of those investments? Because when your parents have equity in any investments, colleges see that as a reason not to give you money because they view that equity as money that your parents could be paying for your education. Yes, that is a scam. I do not agree with it. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just telling y'all how it works. So have those honest conversations and get a good idea what their fiscal state is so you better understand how much you'll be paying for your undergraduate degree.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today and, giving your expertise on this. As y'all can see, May is very smart and intelligent and doing great things. I'm going to put like any information as far as her business in the description box. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.